Humans have need of a home, and it's not necessarily where we come from. My family's from the south, though we're scattered all over the world now. Our spiritual home's over there, in Golden Bay, a little batch at the beach. A residue of memories, a place to rely on. Somewhere we can be ourselves and celebrate life, singly or together. Ray Avery wasn't born into that kind of home. His life began in chaos and confusion. And ever since then, he's been looking for the love that was missing. He's been searching for a home. On the way, Ray developed a staggering array of entrepreneurial skills that have changed literally hundreds of thousands of lives for the better. Ray's found his way home. He's found recognition. He was named New Zealander of the Year in 2010. And though it's taken some time, he's found these things through service to others.
Well, I think it was one of those typical overnight success stories that took 16 years or 18 years of my life. But I think more importantly for New Zealand, it was an acknowledgement that we do have great scientists. I've been working in developing world countries for the last 18 years, trying to make medical devices which make a big difference to healthcare outcomes. I developed some technology which would make modern cataract surgery accessible to people in developing countries. We've invented a low-cost infant incubator, some nutritional products, and all of these things are geared to transforming the infant mortality rates in developing countries.
Is it too much of a New Zealand simplistic cliche to say that you're doing it all out of the back of the garage as well?
Well, I think we like the number 8 fencing wire mentality, and the reality of that is that I couldn't do the work that I do, I don't think, in any other country in the world. We are a totally open source country. We have no full-time employees, for instance, so we need a patent attorney to do something, they'll do it. And it's run out of my home, which also means that our family is part of the organisation as well. My wife helps out with my organisation. She has her own charity, Barefoot Economy. We're a people-based organisation. We're not a lot of extraneous bureaucratic processes.
Pink?
And pink as well. We have to pink.
Nice.
Yes. That's a nice rocket. Should we put some flames coming out the bottom?
Yeah, some fire.
Some fire?
Pink.
Ah, that's the right place.
Home's a good place now, but it wasn't always like that. Your first home was pretty rough.
I was a product of a post-war fling. My father was a returned soldier. Finally met my mother, and they had a liaison, and I was the product of that, but they really didn't want me, so home life was pretty Dickensian in that my mother and father were both career alcoholics and prone to spats of violence. My father had a taxi business, and he used to say that he'd got these fares to go down to Cornwall, which was just an excuse to go off to some woman, and it would always end badly with my mother, and she and he had a big fight, and she locked herself in the bathroom, so he got a hammer and tried to break in, and that didn't work, so he got an axe. She jumped out the window, broke her leg, and the cops turned up, and my father took off, and I was left with my mum and her broken leg. My mother used to work at a hospital as a cleaner, and she used to get home later than me from school, so she used to prepare an evening meal for me, which was always fried eggs, some fried bread typically, but what was ever left over from supper the night before. So she put that in the oven, and it was just a congealed mass of dried fat,
Yeah.
So I would take it out the back, and I'd scrape it all under the hedge. And one day she came home and found about a year's supply of mummified eggs. I mean, they'd just been that nothing would kill these things, And so then she just took to me with a bat and basically beat me unconscious. Thankfully, she had the sense to take me to hospital, and so I ended up with a broken skull and some broken fingers. I guess I could have said nothing or whatever, but I just said my mum hit me and she hits me all the time.
Right.
And so they put me into care, and I never slept under the same roof as my mum ever again.
Really?
So then I was put into foster homes, and post-war Britain, there were about 350,000 kids in the same predicament as me, some of them because of the bombing, some of them because they were post-war fleeing relationships, and some of them got sent to New Zealand and to Australia. The rest of us were just left there in this Dickensian system. We bathed once a week, and by the time 6 guys had been there, it was just a kind of a putrefied fat.
It wasn't helping
it really
anybody.
didn't help a lot, The vestiges of religion for us was to sing a couple of hymns before we went off to school, and all things bright and beautiful would be first off the rank. And
Could hardly be less appropriate.
I know. So what would happen is you'd be fostered out to a family with the hope of being permanently adopted.
Okay.
But as you got older, about 9 years old, it became much more difficult. So you'd be farmed out to all of these families, but there was no true vetting of these people, so there was a whole range of abuse that occurred in these places, often a lot of violence. And there was just as much violence inside the hostels because it was like Lord of the Flies. There were these gangs, and so my job was just trying to survive. So the only defence that you had was to, when you made an appearance, was to be kind of like psychotic or be a bit more madder than they were. And that worked most of the time to buy you some freeboard. But my habit of reading was often getting me into trouble because they saw that as being wimpy.
Right.
So I would have to read under the blankets at night with a small torch that I'd secured. Because that's the other thing, that 8 o'clock the lights would go out and we'd be literally locked in. But during those times there was a lot of abuse by some of the caregivers, and it was a very violent passage. But it came to a head in the sense that I befriended a guy at school. We actually started sharing the adjacent beds with each other, but he became the victim of a abuse with one of these caregivers, and I could see that it was causing him a huge amount of distress. So I went to the headmaster, for want of a better word, and said, this is happening, we want this to stop. And I think the teacher felt betrayed by this boy, and so he turned his kind of loving affection to a more brutal status. And as a result of that, this Graham went into the changing room and hung himself. There was nothing to stay for. And I leapt onto the train and bustled up to London. Finally found an overbridge over the railway, and it had a big concrete buttress when above that was a small flat space. And that was my home for about 9 months. And for the first time in my life, I felt that I was free. So I was doing a paper round. I had 3 paper rounds that I ran. I'd stop going to school. I'd go to the Tate Gallery. I had enough sense to know if I had a school uniform on and a tie, I could get in anywhere. I'd go to the library and sit there all day and read everything. Every library would have an Encyclopedia Britannica. For me, that was a Rosetta Stone of knowledge. Just for fun, at the end of each day when I'd been reading something on science or physics, I would open an Encyclopedia Britannica at some particular page, go like that and read about that, whatever that might be. It might be where Ghana is or something. So I was educating myself.
So how did it all come to an end?
To get up to this parapet, I had to install a rope because in the middle of winter it was just too slippery and icy. And I slipped and gashed my leg right open. So over a period of a week or so, that obviously got very infected. And I cleaned myself up and got onto a train. But I must have gone into a coma or passed out anyway. So they found me and then they took me off to the hospital. They phoned up the school, and there was a wonderful man at the school, a teacher called Jack Wise. He was a very tough teacher. But he gave me an opportunity. He said, look, you can either come and go to 4RH and I'll look after you. I'll find you some digs and a place to live, or you're off back to the orphanages, and that's the end of it, and you've got to tell me now. And I'd have gone with him anyway, because he was, I understood from my observations of life that he was the real deal, and so he found me a place to live. But he was passionate about educating us as kids, so he would take us off to all sorts of bizarre places to learn about the world. So he'd take us to a hospital today, see how the hospital would work. He'd take us off to Dagenham to see how cards were made. So he's trying to make us engaged in the world. Jack recognised, I think, there was a bit of spark of intelligence in me, and he got me a job as a junior laboratory assistant at Y College, which was a satellite part of the University of London. The first picture I have of being at Y College, I've still got my grey jacket on from the orphanages, but I'd managed to score some good suede shoes, but apart from that I was pretty much that orphan kid. And within a year and a half, there's another picture taken. I'm up the back of the professors with an Italian suit on, and they were really responsible for that transformation, because, I remember being there one day, and one of the guys said, "Good Lord, Ray, you can't even speak properly, and you certainly don't know what to eat." I said, "Good Lord." And so we used to have these glorious lunches, because they would have lunches where they'd say, "Ray, I want you to go down to the shop and get some, I'll give you a list of things. The man knows me, and you'll come back." And there would be brie, and there'd be all sorts of wonderful truffles and things. And they would show me, what to eat. I remember seeing mushrooms for the first time. They were cooking them up, and they said, "Do you want some?" And they looked all greasy and slimy. And I said, "I don't think I'm going to like those." And they said, "These are wonderful mushrooms." And I said, "All right, well, I'll try them." And he said, "What do you mean try them?" And I said, "Well, I've never eaten them before." And he said, "Good Lord, Ray," he said, "not only are these going to be the first mushrooms, but they're going to be the best mushrooms you've ever tasted." They all spoke with this Royal Academy of Dramatic Art accent, and they also taught me how to play bridge and how to play tennis, because
the
everything
important
had to be
life skills, yes.
just life skills. But more important, the other life skill, I had to learn to dance. So they sent me off to these dance classes to do ballroom dancing. So I had the whole complete transformation.
And you're beginning to develop businesses again too.
I started working part-time in a petrol station, just serving gas. And then the guys at the back who had the mechanical workshop wanted to get a lease on a petrol station. And I had some money, and I said, well, we'll go into business together. So we started a business basically with a gas station, and started selling used cars. But the thing that was missing in my personal life was love. I was looking for love. So on Thursday, Friday and Saturdays there would be a disco in town going on. So I'd go to the disco and put on my best suit, and I'd drive my E-Type there. So that, and the fact that I had another gas station in a different part of the region, meant that I could develop these relationships with different women in different parts of the country.
Oh, I see.
But it wasn't making me any happier, really. In fact, I was becoming increasingly unhappy, because I didn't like all the lies that I have to tell to keep them all separate.
How did it come to a close?
Well, it literally came to a big close in that I was driving my motorbike, and they put a temporary roundabout up, but somebody stolen the lights, so I couldn't see until I hit the thing too late. And I came off the motorbike, went over and over and over, and broke my tibia, fibula, femur, my collarbone, my arm and my wrist, so all this side was shot. Anyway, we ended up in hospital. But of course the girls all tracked me down. So they all arrived almost en masse, and so they all saw each other, and I was introducing them. That's all I could do. I could just say, "This is Margaret, this is Susan," So it all came to a horrible end. There was no way I could redeem the situation I was in. So I just decided to leave England and sold up my interests. And I ended up, quite by accident, being on a bus which was on its way to Kathmandu. And though I didn't realise it at the time, it had a profound effect on me, seeing countries like India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the extreme poverty. You know, I mean, I thought I'd had it tough, you know, and I saw some of the things that were going on. But eventually I rocked up in New Zealand, and we walked into the airport, and there was a guy in there with an air rifle shooting birds. And I thought, what sort of a country is this? You know, he was just banging away at the birds. Oh, that's pest control, New Zealand style. Anyway, I met a guy on the plane who had been coming back from London, and he said, look, I'll give you a bed for the night. Mum's meeting us at the airport, and I had my first colloquialism clarification, because I thought when he said his mum, he meant his mother, but of course it was his wife, so his wife was there. But she also had his father and mother with them, and so they were already sitting in the back of this Mini. Oh. And we drove all the way to Papakura with him and his father holding my rucksacks out the window by the loops. And that was the first time I knew that for New Zealanders, that impossible is just the starting point.
Right.
By accident, I ended up meeting a chap who introduced me to one of the academics at the University of Auckland, who was going to set up a department of clinical pharmacology. So I took on the role of Chief Technical Officer because of all of my knowledge of analytical chemistry and the work I'd done in analytical testing laboratories in England. We set up a laboratory within the department which did commercial testing for bioequivalence studies for drugs. So if you wanted to introduce a new drug, you could give it to us, we would test it and show that it's the same as the market leader. And that led me to get involved in the New Zealand pharmaceutical industry, because I was approached by Sir Graham Douglas to set up their manufacturing division. I took a lot of people with me from the university, and particularly my mate Phil, who was a great chemist and a great 2IC. So he helped me to get the whole Douglas pharmaceutical manufacturing division going.
Right. But in the end, you decided to form your own company.
I did. There was two pivotal reasons, really. One was that I was at work one day, and there was a phone call from the New Zealand police, and they said, have you got this car registration number, and I said yes, and they said, well, the driver of the car, which was Phil, has committed suicide, but the car hasn't been soiled, so can you come and pick it up? You know, and that was the, you know, it was after what had happened in England. Yeah. You know, it was like, you know, your whole world can be erased, or all the good things that have happened can be erased in a second. You know, and I didn't know how to cope with it particularly, and I took a mutual friend down the pub, and we just sat and looked at each other, and we just found it incredible that that person that we both loved wasn't there anymore. And to some degree, that meant that I could actually move on as well, because I'd stayed also because I felt responsibility to that person. I loved them and I wanted them to be happy. And so we decided to set up the Kaizen Group, which would design and build factories for you and also help you to make the drugs that were inside them. Okay. So it was a one-stop shop. But the caveat was we'd only do it for developing countries, because we wanted to give them a shot at getting into manufacture of good quality medicines. So there was beginnings then of thinking about being a social entrepreneur and trying to make an ethical business, basically. And at that time, unfortunately for me, I had the misfortune to meet Fred Hollows.
Tell us.
I was invited to meet Fred at the Sheraton Hotel in Auckland. He had come to say goodbye to all his family. He was dying of cancer. He subsequently died about 6 months later. And I thought it was a brewery convention, because I'd never seen so many bottles of whiskey in my life, you know, just all these bottles. Everybody brought a bottle of whiskey for Fred to say goodbye. And my friend from the university introduced me along the lines of, this is Ray Avery, he's one of New Zealand's premier pharmaceutical scientists. He can build these labs that you want to build for making lenses in Eritrea and Nepal. He's a very, very clever bloke, and you should talk to Ray. And Fred didn't look at me, he looked at the guy giving the oratory and said, yeah, but is any bloody good? And then he turned on his heels and walked away. And so I took off after Fred, grabbed him by the arm and said, Fred, they tell me you're dying of cancer and I charge $1,000 an hour consultancy fees, so neither of us have got much time to piss around. Do you want to talk to me or not? And he said, I like this guy, give him a whiskey. And literally a week later I was in Sydney planning the first laboratory for Eritrea. Fred admitted to tell me that Eritrea had been at a 30-year war of independence and there was nothing there of any note. The factory was to make intraocular lenses for cataract surgery. Right. If we all live long enough, we'll need a cataract surgery, and that's when the natural lens of your eye goes opaque and you can't get light to the retina. So the World Health Organization operation for doing that was to go inside the eye and take out that lens and throw it away. And then they'd give you a pair of these fantastic aphakic glasses, you see. These are really great. That's really good. I'm going to be your taxi driver today, or I'll be your doctor. And that's not going to work. No. And so we needed to make these little plastic intraocular lenses that fit actually in the eye. But they cost $350 and they were too expensive for people to buy. There was no infrastructure. There was no labour force of any note because a whole generation had been lost to war. There were old people and very young people. And then I had a bit of a catharsis because I thought, I haven't really come on very far from being under the railway bridge. I'm in a room with no water, but I lived through that, and it's about the tenacity and finding a way of doing it.
There would be really heavily green.
We are an amazing group of people who can get in like guerrilla warfare guys and do the job, and we are like brothers. And again, that was part of it, was to try and build a family, a family that I didn't have. It took about 3 years to get it going, and now that, together with its sister laboratory in Nepal, it produces about 16% of the world's supply of lenses. But what we were able to do by having that market share was to collapse the international cartel of the multinationals, bring the price down from $350 down to about $10 today. So that was good to be able to use all of your skills for one master stroke. But what it told me more than anything else was, if you could do that with blindness, you could do it with other interventions in the developing world setting. The intravenous controller will probably have the biggest global impact over time. It'll be equivalent to the plastic hypodermic syringe in the way that it will change clinical care. Many deaths are hidden and occur because of misadministration of medicines. We'd been looking and working in developing countries at what we should be doing to get good health care. And what we discovered was that kids were dying of pneumonia more than they should have done, particularly when they were in infant incubators. And by doing some micro-testing of the contents of the incubators, we found that they were horribly contaminated with bugs because they used ordinary tap water. So what I invented was a device that we fed into our incubator which constantly sterilises the air within the incubator. That will revolutionise the care of those kids because they simply won't die because of preventable problems.
You talk about being an ethical scientist. Do you see a connection between the worlds of religion and spirituality and science?
Well, I think science and technology are what underpin our society. They're the things that make big dramatic changes in our society. If you're well and you're well fed, the next thing you do is to be creative, and then you have art, music and so on. But if you're starving in Africa, the thing you really need is before you can even think about religion to some degree. Although religion, in terms of some countries, is the glue that holds them together because they don't have anything else. So you have to depend on something abstract. And of course, you need to believe in reincarnation if your life's fractious, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. I mean, when I was growing up in the orphanages, I probably survived not because of any religious indoctrination. There wasn't much of it, and certainly all things bright and beautiful didn't cut it for me. I had to dig deep to find the God in me, if you will, or the person that could see some goodness and some spark. So I looked to education and literature to see my relevance in the world at large. Then I didn't feel so alone. So I found my own internal God, if you will. And I think there's parallels to that in Nepal, where if you get greeted in Nepal, they will say Namaste, which literally translated means I worship the God or the goodness within you. And I think that's a wonderful greeting rather than good day. You know, it's like it means that they accept there is a God in you, and all of us, I think, have that potential to display it.
You're someone who's offered love through your work now, of course, and also who's found love. You've found a partner to share your world with.
When I was in the orphanages, I imagined there was this girl in a white dress, and I knew exactly what it'd be like to kiss her. I knew what she would look like, kind of. She would have a white dress on, and I'd be helping her across the stream. There might be a few bamboos jumping around the background, and there was going to be music playing. And of course, in the discos, there were a lot of bouffant hairstyles, but no girl in a white dress. And so I gave up looking, essentially, and then quite by accident in Nepal, I was giving a lecture, and this woman in the white dress walked in, and I knew that it was her, and it was my wife, Anna Cusis. And she runs her own aid organisation, and she was there with a friend and came into the room, and I instantly fell in love with her. And she, of course, didn't notice me at all. And so I remember Khrushchev taking off a shoe at one of the United Nations things and banging the table to attract attention. So I pulled off my shoe and put one of our lens cases on the table and showed people how indestructible it was. And she didn't take any interest. So that failed miserably. But I ended up putting a note under her door at night. I wrote her a note about how I felt. And then we were leaving she was going to Bangladesh and I was going back to Vietnam. And we didn't catch up for 3 months. And then I phoned her in Sydney and I put on my best radar accent and said, "Hello, this is Ray Avery here." And she was dealing with a big problem in Bangladesh. And she said, "Ravi who?" And that rather took the winds out of my sails.
It's not going well,
so
Ray.
Nothing was going well. But finally, she came to New Zealand and we started a relationship that lasted 8 years before we finally got married. There would have been nearly 2,000 people on her side of the pews and about half a dozen on mine. But they were all really joyous people. And if you've seen Big Fat Greek Wedding, this is like that on speed to the power 10. They're gorgeous people and they'll kill you with food. And I love them to bits, and thankfully they love me. A couple of years ago we talked about having a family. Because we've got a combined age of 105, I thought it was going to take about 10 years, but it happened just like that. And we had a beautiful daughter, Amelia. And Amelia has been the last part of fixing the wounds of those last orphanage days, because when my daughter rushes to me and puts her arms around me, that hug that she gives me transforms everything. It's the love that I was looking for in anybody. I got the whole package. I got the family at last, I got the children and the fantastic wife, and also accepted by the country that I choose to live in and I chose to live in, and a place that I call home, New Zealand. That means it doesn't get any better.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.